Welcome back, writers. Today, we're going to take a look at how to take our writing from those details and go just a little bit further. In case you weren't here last time with us, we're going to review some of the things we did last time to begin with, such as academic language. And we're going to also take a look at that ladder from last time, the abstraction ladder. Let's check it out. Okay, so this should be a reminder from last time. We want to use these academic language terms on the right side, like protagonist and resolution, and definitely want to start to get into those story arc terms like rising action, climax, and falling action. In addition, last time we talked about how most of our time gets spent collecting details, maybe 90%, but then eventually we want to move on to that 10%. That 10% is where those big ideas come from, like universal themes or theories that we have about characters. Also, big questions that we have about life, like making connections to your own experiences. And as you're going to see here in a second, we want to make sure that those thoughts end up like raw thoughts on the page. That's going to be our strongest thinking that we can have. We can also learn these sentence starters or use these sentence starters to get our thoughts going. Sometimes it can be hard to get that thing kick-started, so rely on those sentence starters to get it going. So some new things to think about today are transitions, especially the transitions on the right side of the screen. Those are really going to help you make connections between things in the text, like characters, and try to compare and contrast them. In addition, it's going to help you show relationships between characters. Okay, so here we have an example of some really interesting looking writing, but I mean, honestly, the handwriting's better than mine. First of all, what I want you to notice is the use of protagonist, and you notice how they use quotes. Let's dive right in. So it says, "It all started with a whisper, a slow spreading rebellion, yet burning everything in the shirtwaist factories in its path. And Yetta, one of the three major protagonists, it's like saying main character, in the story, and a shirtwaist worker herself, was at the center of it all with her sister Rahel. Yet she realizes, I love when I see writers use realizes, that even Rahel has a breaking point when flames become too large to fame." I'm not sure what they're saying there at the end, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and then "I'm going to marry Mr. Cohen," page 184. Now, I'll be straight up. I'm not really sure what story that this writer's talking about, but we can still hear kind of a little bit of voice, and it's told in almost a really poetic kind of way. These notes are, but we eventually get to the point where we're talking about a protagonist, which we want to notice, and we're starting to bring a couple characters in here with the realization, which we like. But the quote, even though I love quotes and I really want page numbers, I don't see what this quote has to do with this writing. And maybe if I've read the story, I would know. But if I was your teacher, this wouldn't help me. And I'm not sure if it would help you either. So what I encourage you to do here is, if you're going to put a quote in like that and you think that it should be there, explain why it's there. Just like if you're writing an argument essay, you would totally have reasons, evidence, and then you'd have analysis explaining why that piece of evidence you used actually fits there. Moving on to the next example, we see that we're using that transition that I talked about, "on the other hand." Okay, so this is contrasting Jane, this character we're about to see, with the previous ones. So, on the other hand, Jane, another major protagonist, was an outsider. All her father's riches from his factory could not buy her a spot in the circle of Triangle Girls. Triangle of Triangle Girls? Since society would not allow it. Okay, so far we've got use of protagonist, so academic language. We also have transition words. Excellent. Now we've got the quote, which I really like. And this quote is a great quote. I have never read the story yet. I know what they're talking about. The quote goes, Jane didn't, not really. But there was something about these girls spilling out from the Triangle Waste Factory, something she couldn't quite name but almost envied. Page 40. Envied. We get that there in that quote, and it's super powerful because the writer here talks about how she was an outsider, about how despite everything in this person's life, she wanted to be like these Triangle girls. I can see that then as the teacher reading this, and definitely it's a clear connection that was made using transitions, using quotes, and using academic language. It's awesome. Here's the last example. This example is from a student in my own class, and I love this example. It shows raw thinking right on the page. You'll notice that in the beginning, just like when we're sort of beginning our journey of writing about reading, you'll notice that these first entries are just details. It's like Tessa saw her dead father die. Tessa went to go with her mom. Karen is pregnant. Tessa feels lost. Like, they're just details that definitely I don't know too much about. But look what happens when we get to 5:10 and 5:13. This brain is on the page, okay? They've spilled their brains onto the page. She starts with, what is the word for infinite love for someone but always being drawn away by some invisible force? So then they follow it up with explaining like what that relationship's kind of like. But here's kind of a part where I really think they go further. They ask a question down below, right above the yellow writing. It says, how does this relate? So they're comparing again. And then that yellow part there could be a little confusing, and they realize that they're thinking as they write. They go, does that make sense? That's beautiful. Being able to write and think at the same time is what we want. But here's my favorite part, 5:13. It says, my characters are slowly falling back into a routine of fighting, then loving each other again. Why? Tessa always says, I'm done and we are over, but never fulfills her words. Why? Maybe it's because love conquers all. I'm going to stop there and point out that they start with sort of this, like, my characters thing. It's like we can see their ownership of the characters in the story. Like they are their pets in some ways. We have this super strong connection, which is how we want you to feel about your characters. And then they follow up with a question of why. Why is this happening? And they guess at it. I followed up again with why. And here's my favorite part. Maybe it's because I love that transition. I love that phrase that shows us they're thinking. They're not sure, but they're thinking. And then the theme, love conquers all. We want to be pushing our thinking to consider those kind of universal themes that are going on in stories. And the last thing I'll say is, and then of course we followed up with quote and page number. I love that thinking though. Okay. So the last reminder is as you're working today, you should use these transitions and lean on these sentence starters for considering theme in your own work. Writers, until I see you next time, happy writing.